In at 10, The Bite of 87. The survival logbook makes an appearance on yet another list because it still makes me mad to this day. This time, either solidifying or making The Bite of 87 even more confusing. The Bite of 87 being the mysterious incident where someone, presumably Jeremy from FNAF 2, gets his frontal lobe bitten off by an animatronic. We thought that we had the animatronic who did it pinned as Mangle, but then Ultimate Custom Night comes along and then proposed that maybe it was Toy Chica, with the voice line of "Where's my beak?" lodged in your forehead, of course. What the hell else could that mean? However, I think the logbook actually tries to give us more of an answer as to who done did it. On page 35, the book asks you some would you rather questions about if you were trapped under a desk for a week or surrounded by baby-themed animatronics, but the last question it asks you is whether you would rather lose a frontal lobe or an arm. Every other question makes sense, aside from this one, at least in that situation. But if you go to page 87, you see a couple of animatronic cage matches where you're determining the winner and why they would win. On page 86, this happens as well, but both animatronics up for debate are in this section, but Mangle is the only one that we think could have done it that appears on page 87, and they're clearly set up to win because they're being pitted against Balloon Boy. I mean, it's a freaking fox versus a baby. How do you think that's gonna go? Chica is also presented in this section, but she's on page 86 against Freddy, which is a much more fair matchup. Maybe this is Scott trying to correct us from what we thought we learned in Ultimate Custom Night, or maybe it's just another coincidence or a diversion, but it doesn't matter as long as they let us know who did it in the FNAF movie. Please, if you omit this key moment from the series in this movie, I'm going to sue you. Speaking of which, in at 9, The Box. What's in the box? The FNAF 4 box has, like The Bite of 87, been a pain in the ass for all FNAF fans, and those who try to explain things have been struggling for a while to explain what could be inside this infamous box. However, FNAF 6 might have given us an answer that we were looking for with its simple final speech. In Henry's final speech from the true ending of the game, the layout of the FNAF 6 pizzeria is oddly similar to the layout of the FNAF 6 building, and the stories from Candy Cadet talking about 5 things becoming one thing and then getting put in a box makes sense with this as well. 5 animatronics, however you want to count it: Baby, Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, the puppet, Lefty, or Molten Freddy as most of them. However you want to work it, even if you include your character, 5 things are becoming one fire. That yeah, they all go up in smoke, and that's Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. While William might have escaped, maybe that's what the box is supposed to represent. You know, the box being the reality that William is able to escape all the time. Who knows, really? I don't, but you know what? Hopefully we will after this goddamn movie, because this is one of the biggest mysteries of the series, so it would be nice if you were to explain it. In at 8, Coffee. In FNAF VR Help Wanted, you can see multiple animatronics, but one of the most interesting is probably the coolest hidden secret animatronic in the series ever, and yeah, there's secret animatronics. Coffee is actually not even an animatronic in the FNAF series. It's from another one of Scott's games, which failed, like every other game before FNAF, unfortunately, but at least FNAF was successful. So, you know, he's gonna make references. This one is one of them. The game from which Coffee hails is called Desolate Hope, and in that game, Coffee is an autonomous service robot designed to tend to the needs of the nearby humans. It's a sentient coffee machine that actually makes coffee. Welcome to Yog Labs. Coffee can be seen in FNAF 3 in VR if you reload the level enough times. He will at some point randomly be sitting on your desk. You can't really interact with him, and he won't actually make you coffee, which sucks because, you know, when I'm freaking out because a 60-year-old dude is trapped in an animatronic coming after me at 2 a.m., you know, I should need it because, you know, it's 12 to 6 a.m. Like, all you need is like a shot of William getting his morning cup of joe in the movie, right? And then just have the coffee maker look like coffee from Desolate Hope, and we will all be happy. We will cheer. We will actually cheer. And it's 7, lawsuits. Yeah, I've mentioned these lawsuits quite a bit on another list, but there was good reason for it, okay? Lawsuit number 4 in FNAF 6. Well, I mean, like, number 4, at least if you go by the fandom wiki gallery order, but civil suit number 365422879 has their first complaint as, quote, a young boy suffered severe mental trauma because of the defendant Fazbear Entertainment Inc.'s ice-cold indifference to the health and well-being of the human population, which, I mean, while true, we all know it's true, wouldn't actually be valid on a lawsuit. You can't describe the company as cold-hearted or say that they didn't care about the health and well-being of the human population. That's slander, or libel, depending on how you want to pursue it. But as it would pertain to the facts of the case itself, they have no information as to what is in the brains of others. It's like how you can't use what someone else has said to you as evidence, objection, hearsay. But in this case, it doesn't seem like Fazbear actually has fault in this incident. The ground gave way beneath the boy and he got trapped in basically a mini sinkhole, something that would have been near impossible to calculate and actually comes back to bite Fazbear Entertainment in the ass when, the sinkhole happens in security breach. But it's also noted on the suit that Fazbear Entertainment lowered him pizza and party favors while they were waiting for emergency services. Okay, come on, that's doing their part. What are they gonna do? Pull this kid out of a sinkhole? And also, all this kid ended up developing from this was a fear of the dark and a fear of anchovies, both of which I had as a kid, and I'm not suing anyone. So I want to see them explore lawsuits like this in the movie. I want to see William in court. Come on, put him up against Mike Ross. In its 6th, the 4th child. I proposed this idea that perhaps William and his wife or baby mama, but most likely wife at this point, had 4 kids instead of 3. The 3 that we see in game. This was mostly based off The Immortal and the Restless, the TV series from Sister Location, where a woman was telling a character most assumed to be a representation of William that he had a son that clearly was his, but he was denying it. And then after looking at the genetics and then trying to explain to the people in my life who don't really understand it and pushing them all away and causing self-isolation, it just shows how likely this scenario was. If the babies came out blonde, William might just have thought that they weren't his. But what if later William realized that the baby was in fact his and wanted it back? Or perhaps I'm wrong about the whole thing. I don't know. At least I wasn't sure until a comment from YouTube user Saber Sapphire on Tiny Details Part 7 actually gave me a little bit of info. I think we can all agree that Ballora is an allegory for Mrs. Afton, alright? William made the robot as a way to cope. And we can also agree that she's supposed to be a mother figure to the mini Renas. And that's what got us all thinking that she was meant to be a mother in the first place, aside from her song. Well, Saber pointed out that the number of mini Renas that Ballora has is 4. Okay, Ballora has 4 children, and if she's meant to represent the mother of the Afton kids, this detail could solidify this theory even more. And maybe that's where Vanessa comes from. Alright? Explore it in the movie. Give me some like Jane the Virgin drama where Afton has a 4th kid. Come on. How about doing a number 5 Secret Panther? No, partner. How about doing a number 5 Secret Partner? Glitch Trap is an odd character, okay? They're supposed to be an accidental addition to FNAF VR, but they somehow are able to interact with the environment and alter aspects of the game. That's not an accident, okay? I've always questioned why Glitch Trap is able to move the curtain in the final scene and then put us in the Freddy suit, but how is he able to do that if he's supposed to be a spirit? Well, he can't, alright? That's not it. Any being must obey the laws of the form they inhabit, or whatever it says in it, chapter 2. So, how is he able to move things like a curtain when I can't move them in game, alright? Simple. He wasn't an accident. He was a glitch, but he was intentional. He was meant to be there, obviously. That's why Vanny's working on getting him out, or ends up getting him out, or whatever it is. He was meant to be there, okay? Glitch Trap was an intentional feature of FNAF VR, which makes me think, who else is working for him? Because at this point, Vanny wouldn't have been possessed or under his control. So yeah, I hope they explore that in the FNAF movie, or at least like introduce a character that is clearly meant to be this mysterious third party. In a 4, hiding spot. I really hope this movie answers this question properly, because I swear to the Dark Lord Cthulhu this should not have been possible. William should in no way have gotten away with putting the missing children's victims in the animatronics like we're led to believe. The smell of rotting bodies would ruin everything. The decomp would speed up because the animatronics are moving around. I don't know how many times I've said this at this point. Okay, they're in front of people every single day. People started complaining that they were leaking blood and mucus and that they were smelling like death. There's no way that if William getting away wasn't important to the story, he wouldn't have been caught. Come on. It was also pointed out to me that Foxy has holes in his body, alright? So if there was a kid that was in there, you'd be able to see it. You'd be able to high-five little Timmy as you're walking by Foxy and he's putting on a show, but then you're like, wait a second, that's a body. So yes, while originally maybe we were like led to believe that I have to put the bodies in the animatronics, it's basically impossible. So I hope they explain what actually happened in the movie. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, 1985 keypad. The security panel code of 1985 from sister location revealing images of like the FNAF 4 house isn't a new thing. We've known it for ages, but and many are using this to confirm the events of this game taking place in 1985, or actually trying to confirm FNAF 4 taking place in 1985. But this begs the question, where did these rooms come from? If this confirms the events of the game taking place in 1985, why are the houses we play in during the 8-bit and then the main gameplay so different? I mean, it could be an illusion since we know that the animatronics are, because you know it's a brain coma thing. But like, if that was the case, how would the cameras be seeing this? Okay, and if these are two different houses, why? Why? What does that mean for the series overall? Like, come on. Hell, where's the parents' bedroom in the 8-bit house, okay? Is it like that locked door? But like, is that the room? And even if it is, where's the plush trap hall? This is one thing that's always bothered me about this game, and I know, okay, like of all things, this is gonna bother me? Yes. Okay, because as far as I'm concerned, FNAF 4 is a video game in their universe, so those cameras can't be legit, unless it was just meant to illustrate that they would be in the same house or something. But ultimately, in number 2, explosive ending. William dies, okay, at the end of Man in Room 1280, not before that. The third story of the 5th Fazbear Frights book, and he does so quite extravagantly, exploding into a pile of mush right before a pastor's eyes. But how is that possible? How could William just explode? It's not something you really think about, but I have quite the explanation because I just want it to happen. William knew about possession, and he knew how it happened. He knew that the agony required to do such a thing was excruciating, because, you know, his daughter got scooped, his son got crunched. So what if he just wanted to ensure that he would suffer extreme agony by injecting or installing some form of explosive device within him that, when triggered, if like in the vicinity of like a Fazbear warehouse or something, would just boom, boom, instantly. Alright? I mean, it would mean that he couldn't fly anywhere, but he doesn't really need to fly anywhere. He has everything he needs. So yeah, this guy was mental, possibly injecting himself with a remnant, which is molten soul metal, in order to stay alive. So yeah, this isn't out of the question. So if the movies want to get closer to where the games are, with the next 2 movies that Matthew Lillard's contract has actually confirmed, then I don't know, maybe we could get a security breach movie if they do this. So do it. I want to see Shaggy as William Afton explode. And finally, in number 1, back together. I'll put you back together. That's it. That's the number. I want this explained. Okay? Is Crying Child a robot? Just tell me. Tell me. Please. And attend the Purple Guy animatronic. The Purple Guy animatronic legend is an urban legend revolving around FNAF in early 2015. A YouTube video surfaced that reportedly showed a hidden animatronic reported to be the Purple Guy, who at the time the only name we had for the main antagonist. The appearance of the Purple animatronic was preceded by a phone ringing, because we thought that he was also the phone guy. And then after the phone rang, the Purple animatronic would briefly flash on screen, slumped over against the wall in the office in a similar style to Golden Freddy. However, it was soon revealed that this was simply because the animatronic was simply a photoshopped image of Golden Freddy with a purple color and Chica's head. I think that it's pretty obvious that it was photoshopped, and I mean that, like, we've used that image in thumbnails a couple of times, but no character like this has ever showed up in any of the games. But nevertheless, I'd still like to see it appear in the movie as like an Easter egg or a reference, okay? Same thing for, in at number 9, Buff Helpy. This meme, created by @Dominius on Twitter, Buff Helpy was made for the YouTuber Daco's FNAF meme reviews, since that was the primary content on his channel at the time. He made a joke in the video where he pretended to be terrified of it, and then people started sending him tons of memes about that one single image. It has since spread from there, leading to Buff Helpy even getting his own spin-off game. Yeah, he even has his own Urban Dictionary page that labels him as a traitor to his country who loves stalking the YouTuber Daco and somehow always makes it into Daco's FNAF meme reviews. Followed by the use of the term in Buff Helpy is best boy. Buff Helpy is not best boy, okay? And this entire thing was posted by a user called Buff Helpy Enthusiast. And you know what? Buff Helpy has also haunted me. I hadn't seen any of Daco's FNAF meme reviews, so luckily I was oblivious to this. However, people just started randomly sending it to me on Instagram, and then it kinda scared me from there. And while it may be haunting, anything, at least a mention of it in the movie would be very much appreciated, like how Sonic was referenced in the Sonic movie. And it ain't Chucky. Now, while not canon in the FNAF universe, there is certainly no doubt that Chuck E. Cheese's was the inspiration for the FNAF series. And while yes, the comments about Chipper and Son's Lumberco characters looking like robots pushed Scott towards the idea, we've made a whole video about how FNAF and Chuck E. Cheese are the same thing. So, getting a Chuck E. Cheese reference or Easter egg in the movie would be absolutely amazing. Even if it's someone just like proposing or pitching a new character that just so happens to look a hell of a lot like Chucky, that's good enough for me. There just needs to be some form of reference to it. Or, if you're not going to do that, make a reference to one of the many FNAF fan games in the Fanverse initiative, okay? Make them at least slightly canon in the movie universe of the FNAF multiverse. Show us like a Candy's Burgers and Fries paper plate, or like an Ignited Freddy proposition, okay? I mean, you did it in Security Breach, why not make it into the movie? And at 7, Freddy. Feel like this one's kind of obvious, but I have to say it anyway. Freddy was the mascot when the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened up in 1983. And in 1987, he and the original animatronics had fallen into severe disrepair. That's when Freddy was replaced with his newer counterpart for the improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. You know, Toy Freddy. After that pizzeria closed, as well as the toy animatronics getting scrapped though, they refurbished the old animatronics for the new pizzeria, which was the old pizzeria, which is the one that we see in the first game. Yeah. That's FNAF. However, after the closure of that pizzeria, he and the other animatronics got dismantled by William Afton, the killer of the series. But Freddy is literally the title character, okay? Of not only the movie, but the series as well. And while he may not have originally been intended to move off the stage, he does now. He's the most iconic FNAF animatronic ever. He has like 15 variations on his design over the past 8 years since the series has been active. So yeah, I expect to see Freddy on the big screen, and if he isn't there, I will riot at the local Chuck E. Cheese. And it ain't Fredbear. With the concept of a Mike screenplay, I think that everything relating to the major events in not just Michael's life, but the Aftons' lives as a whole would be essential to see, especially a moment as life-changing as the Bite of 83. So the Fredbear animatronic in non-nightmare form is a must in my eyes, but also not very likely unless it's like a flashback sequence. They're probably not going to worry about the events of the games, but this would probably just be an effort to confirm the main character as Mike and prove that Mike isn't Crying Child, but also as an Easter egg for fans that will hopefully have the 1983 date on the flashback. But then again, every 87 believer is going to say that they're different universes, so it doesn't count as confirmation. Either way, I think a Fredbear appearance is kind of mandatory, but I'm not in the movie, so who knows what they think is required. Scott, you should have put me in the movie. How many FNAF videos have I f***ing made at this point? 500? Yeah. God. How about doing a number 5, Springtrap? Springtrap is also kind of a mandatory appearance in my mind, because after all, he's the main antagonist of the series. And while the story is about Mike, based on the games, the only version of William that could appear is Springtrap. If you think about it, Michael was a teen, or close to it, in 1983, meaning that by the time the first game comes around in 1993, he would probably be around 23 to 26. But at this point, William was also already Springtrap, since as we're going through the FNAF 3 minigames, we see Mango walking around, meaning that this takes place around FNAF 2, but shortly after, so that the toy animatronics could get scrapped. So unless this takes place while Mike is a teenager, which could make sense given the demographic of the FNAF fandom, the only real version of William that is at least part animatronic, since this list is the animatronics we want to see in the movie, would be Springtrap, since Scraptrap doesn't come until Michael's death in FNAF 6, and they wouldn't kill off the protagonist of the movie in the first movie, and Burntrap doesn't come until after Mike is actually dead. So yes, the only version of William that has robotic parts that could be in this movie would be Springtrap. Springtrap isn't a full animatronic, but you know what, it's my list. And at 4, Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy is a mysterious ghost-like entity who takes on the form of the yellow animatronic bear version of normal Freddy. Like I said, he has 15 different versions. He plays a prominent role in the FNAF series, although his origins are cryptic and unknown, but many speculate that Crying Child at least one point possessed the animatronic, which would be an easy confirmation to make in a movie about his brother. Or on the other hand, many also believe Golden Freddy to be possessed by Cassidy, and that Cassidy is also the vengeful spirit, aka the one you should not have killed. Although in my research, it's much more likely that Crying Child is the vengeful spirit, and Cassidy is the one who actually possesses Golden Freddy, since it makes for a better story, and in all honesty, okay, Cassidy doesn't really have any significance. I'm sorry. It's true though, okay. Cassidy is at least less significant than Crying Child. Actually, Cassidy has no meaning to the story at all, alright? The name reveal of Cassidy meant nothing to us. However, confirmation for any explanation or any sequence of events would be much appreciated. So needless to say, it would be great to see them, because it means that we might get something to help us figure this out properly. Maybe, unless the movie contradicts itself 10 minutes later, which I'm expecting. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, the puppet. The puppet is an animatronic puppet, obviously. That is a major antagonist, but also a good guy in the FNAF series. First appearing as the main antagonist of FNAF 2, but on later games showing its heroic side, it possibly serves as the prize vendor of the newly refurbished Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria in 1987, the one FNAF 2, which also is a new one, but then also ends up becoming the old one. Although it's implied that it was originally from Fredbear's Family Diner, and that's a whole other can of worms I am not going to talk about, because hell no. After the pizzeria was only open for a few short weeks, though, it was closed down. But the puppet, unlike the other toy animatronics were scrapped, possibly due to malfunctions, was not scrapped, later appearing in the new pizzeria from the first game as evidenced by the dream cutscenes, and appearing as Lefty in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, aka FNAF 6. Lefty was an animatronic intended to capture the puppet because Charlotte's father, Henry, knew that her soul possessed the animatronic. However, it's also widely believed that Charlotte was William's first victim, meaning that overall they have the most significance to the story. So definitely required if we're going to have a story based on William Afton's crime spree and how it affects his only living child, which is the whole concept for FNAF. So I'm guessing it's gonna happen. Penultimately, in at number 2, Foxy. Now while Foxy may be a fan favorite and one of the core animatronics, it's pretty much guaranteed that he'll be in the movie. Although while being in the core cast, there is another reason we need to see Foxy on the silver screen in the Mike story. Foxy bro. See, before we had seemingly confirmed the name of the older brother, since we were flip-flopping between whether Michael was the older brother or Crying Child's name, the only thing that we knew about the brother was that he enjoyed wearing the Foxy mask to scare Crying Child, seemingly also ripping the head off the stuffed version of the character, possibly due to jealousy. So we ended up nicknaming Michael Foxy Bro, mostly thanks to matpat's suggestion. So I think that an animatronic that was highly associated with the character of Mike, or who at least we think Mike is, should absolutely be in the movie, and if not, I'm gonna be mad, alright? I wanna see a hook. And finally, in at number 1, Nightmares. I think that if this is really meant to be a horror movie, which it is, I mean, it's being produced by Blumhouse after all, the company that made Paranormal Activity, the nightmares are basically a requirement to actually make this scary. Sorry, but the normal animatronics aren't really all that terrifying. Scariest part about those games is the sounds that appear with the animatronics, but the nightmares are truly terrifying, and one of the reasons I don't want to play FNAF 4 or the Night Terror levels of Help Wanted. It's why I didn't complete the game, because I would have had to play those. These things are just absolutely horrific and iconic within the series, especially since they're the reason there is a movie at all. As you well know, at this point, Scott was planning on ending the series after Game 3, but the hate on the Springtrap jump scare made him make another game, and which was FNAF 4, and then he kept on going. If not for the Nightmare animatronics and the Springtrap hate, there wouldn't be a FNAF movie, and I think that that deserves to be represented. Of course in a dream sequence, but still, it's worth it. And at 10, Immortal and the Restless. Now, okay, I know that at least the vast majority of the comments in these videos seem to think that this show is like a linchpin in the series that's proving that Afton killed his wife and what her name is, but that's still highly unlikely. The Immortal and the Restless has never popped up again after Sister Location. There has never been another instance of that show having any significance other than just being a show that we watched after we came home from work. It didn't reveal the mother's name, it didn't reveal that Afton never wanted a son, because if he never wanted Crying Child, why would he have tried or sworn to at least put him back together? Or it didn't reveal that Michael and Elizabeth were possessed, or literally anything else that we've seen happen in the series. It didn't prove anything. It wasn't a reference to anything. It was just a purple vampire that was denying a vampire kid. Okay, it doesn't make sense. The Immortal and the Restless shows up less often than the name Jeremy. Alright, plus, the TV you watch doesn't reflect your personal life or your dad's personal life, so I want the show to appear on a TV in one of the scenes. Even if it's in like a window of an electronics store, just have it there so that we know it's just a show. And at 9, nightmares. The nightmare animatronics are the most menacing in the entire series. I mean, they're named the nightmare animatronics for a reason, but given the name, they also aren't exactly real, which makes it difficult for these characters to appear in the movie. So why not just have a dream sequence that includes the nightmare animatronics? It's as simple as that. And if you wanted to, you could have it start the movie, which in my opinion would be a hell of an opening. However, I guess at this point asking them to add scenes is kind of pointless since they've started production with these specific things being greenlit, so I guess this is rather a number hoping that this is something that they had planned on originally, because it's possibly too late now, since most of the time they delete scenes from the final cut rather than add them in. But I don't know, I have yet to be cast in something, so I have no idea how that really works. Yeah, I'm not famous enough for the star power, and I am the default character setting for white guy, so oh well. And at 8, YouTubers. Don't worry, okay, I don't mean myself, although I would have enjoyed being in the movie, not salty at all. But mostly I'm just hoping that they make references to the YouTubers that helped make the series successful, okay? I mean, come on. Would you really know about FNAF if it wasn't for Markiplier? Or would you care about the lore if it wasn't for channels like Daco, FNAF, and Super Horror Bro, especially when MatPat is in between theories? Not really. And the same is true for a lot of indie games, alright? Minecraft wouldn't be nearly as successful if it wasn't for the first wave of Minecrafters like Yogscast and the Minecraft SMP. Mod reviews and Shadow of Israfel is what made the game so appealing. And the same is true for the longevity of all games. Skyrim wouldn't be as popular 11 years later without mod reviews and role players. Security Breach got featured next to God of War, for God's sakes. Pun intended. And like, that's why the YouTubers who helped assure the series' success should at least be referenced, okay? I mean, come on. Markiplier was in the trailer for FNAF 6 for crying out loud. At least name drop him in the movie. And it's 7 games. The in-universe kind specifically, but in my mind those are at times one and the same. I'd just like some form of reference to the games that Scott's in-universe counterpart designed according to the FNAF VR opening scene. So it could give us a reference, but also like a bit of clarity as to what the games actually are. Like, am I right about FNAF 4, 6, and Ultimate Custom Night being games? Or are they like the mini games from between nights? Are those the games? What's the deal here? This is part I want the Easter egg, but also part I just want an explanation, because this could explain a whole load of things depending on what direction they took with it. But I mean, that's aside the point, really, okay? I just want them to talk about the games or make a reference to it, or even like suggest if Fazbear Entertainment actually paid Scott to make them or if he did them himself, alright? To let me know if I should be trusting Tape Girl / I guess assumingly Vanessa at that point. And at 6, Scrap Trap. This is along the lines as well as like wanting a game reference, because Scrap Trap is like the most annoying wild card that Scott has ever thrown in. And that's saying something. Like, how do you go from Springtrap to the exaggerated and cartoonish design of Scrap Trap and then back to Burn Trap, who is too close to Springtrap for it to make sense? It doesn't. It's certainly weird, but it's also something that they could easily explain in the movie. But even if they didn't explain it, even like calling something a scrap trap or like a discarded Springlock suit a trap of scrap or something, it would be enough to make the fans giggle. But my preferred Easter eggs are also explanations, because there's so much that we have to guess about it that at this point what we think we know about the series is built off guesses. And even if they're educated guesses that are built on facts that we know, we can't be sure about it unless Scott confirms it, and that's why it's so difficult to figure things out. Scott designed it this way so that he wouldn't be locked into like a story or rules that he set, because he didn't set them. We did. So make a decision this time, Scott, please, for my own sanity. Halfway through at number 5, game theory. Okay, now, I know I said earlier on, like, YouTubers should be referenced like Markiplier, okay? But game theory itself is such a huge influence on the game's success that it deserves its own mention, okay? Something more than, like, the possible FNAF video game cameo montage a la Free Guy, but I think, like, the show of game theory specifically should have its own reference as, like, a crime podcast or an online conspiracy guy who's, like, trying to sort out the mystery of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I don't know, I think that would be the best way to actually incorporate it and have it make sense. Or maybe the investigating detective's name is Matthew, because that would be funny. I think that little extra nod to the guy that really made the majority of us aware of the series is definitely deserved, if not required by fans, depending on how you feel. You might not like him at this point, but come on. Hey, I wouldn't have known about FNAF if it wasn't for MatPat choosing it over Slenderman because of a poll. So yeah, he also said that he didn't have an idea for what the Slenderman theory would have been. So I think we can all agree that Matt deserves a reference in the movie. It's better than a comment that you delete 8 hours later, Scott, alright? And plus, I want MatPat to notice me. In it for Shaggy. This is purely because I think William Afton making a Scooby-Doo reference would be hilarious, okay? Obviously, I don't think it will happen, because it would probably ruin the tone of the movie, but movies or shows referencing an actor's previous work is not a new or unheard of thing. There's entire compilations of series referencing previous movies and shows that their actors starred in, with things like the Arrowverse talking about Victor Garber and the Titanic, or Brandon Routh returning as Superman. But also, Supernatural had a whole episode where Jared and Jensen played Sam and Dean in a world where Supernatural was a TV show. So they played their characters playing themselves and had to act as those characters acting in an episode as if they were themselves. You get me? Am I the only one who understood that train of thought? Maybe, but that's fine. Okay, and while those may seem like extreme examples, this is also a series where a serial killer dies and possesses a hard drive that gets scanned into a VR game, which lets him then possess another person's brain and control them into bringing his body, which is stuck in a robot suit, back from death. So, it's not really that far out of the question to have Afton say zoinks. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, legal trouble. Fazbear Entertainment has gone through a lot of They've had countless controversies and lawsuits, and most of them are their own doing. I mean, hell, we've made entire lists based on the various OSHA violations that they would have committed. We've made lists about the worst things done by both Afton and Henry, and one of them is supposed to be the good guy. There's even whole mechanics in FNAF 6 surrounding fighting off lawsuits, which has to have a reason to be there. So, I think showcasing some of these issues, or even like making a mention of some of the problems we've seen, is warranted in the movie. And I hope it comes to pass, because this would certainly be an interesting like mini plot, or even just like a way to figure out how William skirted these issues and managed to stay out of jail. Come on, you can't tell me you're not the least bit curious about how he was able to not get discovered, especially when his partner was onto him, and so suspicious in fact that he upped the security for his daughter. I mean, not effectively, but like I've ranted about that previously, so I won't go into it again. But ultimately, at number 2, Fazbear Frights. No, I'm not talking about the FNAF 3 location. That's Fazbear's Fright, although I understand the confusion. It's basic FNAF. I'm talking about how and I'm pretty sure plenty of you, at least, want references to the various events found throughout the Fazbear Frights books. You know, the ones with like the 3 stories each about different events happening surrounding the restaurants and characters without really being confirmed or denied as canon. Yeah, those. Like even some minor things, that like what happened to the kid who put on Bellora's glasses and danced with me, okay? What about the time-traveling ball pit? That seems so important and like it would change everything, since the game coming out after that had a ball pit in it and then nothing came of it. Yeah, are we gonna see Oscar pop his head out of one in the movie and then like instantly disappear? Because that would be an insane reference. That would actually make me go nuts in the theater. And I just remembered that I'm actually going to have to see this. I'm not the biggest fan of horror, and I mean the last movie I saw for this channel was Sonic, so I guess I've done it before. I can do it again. Finally, in at number 1, Dream Theory. Hey, most of you have heard this before. The idea that everything we have seen in these games is a dream. Sure, Help Wanted gets meta and kind of put that theory to bed, and Scott has said no multiple times. But what if all the things that we were seeing are still a dream? What if it's not crying child in his home or in the hospital who's waking up every morning? What if it's like William Afton dreaming about the insane things he plans on doing and how well it's gonna work out for him? Well, I guess to him it would be working out because he's a lunatic. But I don't know, time works differently in dreams. You can go a whole month of your life and then wake up and it's only been 6 hours. And sure, sometimes you're able to control your dreams, but that's difficult to do, at least I think so. Because once you realize you're dreaming, for me anyways, I wake up. So, what if he's only like considering killing people right now? And then like this is his mind telling him not to do it, or I guess to do it, because again, he's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Or what if we're still dreaming through Crying Child, and he's like trying to justify the things that he saw, or he played the games and he's having nightmares about them? I don't know, but no matter what, I'd like to see some form of reference to dream theory in the movie, even if we know it's wrong, okay? Like just have someone wake up from a dream like Wizard of Oz style, but in the sense that they thought it was real and not like that everything was actually a dream. Because if this movie is revealed to be a dream at the end, I'm walking out of the theater. In a 10 script theme. Back in 2021, there was a whole Reddit post titled "Bad News About the FNAF Movie," which plenty of Redditors also decided to report for breaking Rule 9 of the FNAF subreddit, that rule being no misleading titles. And technically, they were right, since this was ultimately a joke post by Scott Cawthon, since the bad news was that they came up with the script, so they weren't making any more scripts. But again, it wasn't removed because, I mean, it's Scott. The scrapped scripts included things like The Plushies Take Manhattan, Silver Eyes, Pawn Shop, Cassidy, and Ghost Trackers, which is basically just the Ghost Facers from Supernatural but FNAF themed. But they all had their own issues. Some were too crammed, some had too low stakes, some were just plain old boring, and also apparently a lack of coherent story was listed as a problem for one of them, despite that being the whole selling point of the series. But eventually, they settled on a screenplay known as the Mike screenplay, which has the description as, quote, this makes sense, why didn't I think of this before? So, that's what we know. We know that it's probably themed around Mike, but that's it. Also guys, if you're enjoying the video and want to see more like it, be sure you hit like, alright? It helps us out. The algorithm is a pain, so please hit like, juice the numbers. It inflates my ego exponentially, and I need it right now. Okay. It at 9's production date. Did you know that the FNAF movie first started being discussed in 2015? Yeah, well, it's 7 years later. After that, the movie aimed to release in 2020, and then in 2021, Scott said that filming would start in spring of this year. And now, in 2022, from the mouth of Jason Blum himself, or I guess technically from his fingers because it was on Twitter, we now know that the FNAF movie is supposed to be filming in February of 2023. As to whether that's actually going to happen is honestly questionable, since I mean this is yet another time that we've been told something is going to get filmed, but we won't know if it's true until February of next year. But at least it's something to look forward to for the end of winter, since for some reason someone decided to put Christmas at the beginning of the coldest and most depressing time in the goddamn world. So maybe instead you can have this be something that we can all look forward to after the snow, at least if you're in this hemisphere. Cause like once Christmas is over, alright, the snow has no point to be here, okay, and I want it gone. So I'll be using the FNAF filming as a way to cope, basically. In a date, original plan. In July of 2015, it was reported that Gil Kenan, who's done The Poltergeist and Monster House, had made a deal with Warner Brothers to direct a Five Nights at Freddy's movie adaptation, since, you know, it was a year after the first release and it was immensely popular. In June of 2017, Kenan announced that his adaptation had been cancelled by Warner Brothers and that he was stepping down. And in early 2018, it was announced that Blumhouse Productions was set to make the movie with Chris Columbus, the one who worked on Harry Potter, Home Alone, and Mrs. Doubtfire, not the other one, as the director, and the project was aiming for a 2020 release date. But I mean, at this point, like I said, it's 2022 and they haven't even started filming. So I think it's fairly safe to say that while we knew the original plan, that's gone out the window. And then it's been laying on the I-95 being run over for the better part of 2 years now. And in this metaphor, the window is also next to the highway. And at 7, Blumhouse. Like I just mentioned, the current company producing the movie, despite the original director having left, is Blumhouse Productions. Blumhouse is still producing, even though Chris Columbus isn't directing. And honestly, that's probably a good idea in general for Blumhouse, since Blumhouse is known for making incredible productions on smaller budgets, Paranormal Activity being the best example of this. But also with movies like Get Out, Split, The Purge, Insidious, and more under their belt, Blumhouse was honestly who should have had this movie from the beginning. Especially since I feel like this movie can give off a very, like, Saw vibe with the whole Springlock suits and all that jazz. Like, if the game scenario was made into a movie, instead of this being a separate entity, it would absolutely end up being a very Saw-like scenario. I can imagine, like, the phone guy saying things like, the crank to those Springlocks is inside you, and not in a metaphorical way, it's literally in your leg. And then there's like a time for like an hour before the sprinklers come on, which we all know is a bad idea with Springlock suits and stuff. I don't know. I think it would be funny. That would be fun. Someone should do that as a fan film. And at 6, official casting. There was a lot of rumored casting for the FNAF movie a while back, alright? We even made a whole video about our favorite fan casts. However, about the official casting, alright, there is none. There has been no officially announced casting despite what Google might say. Google, when it brings up a cast list, doesn't actually use the movie, alright? It uses as many sources as it can to find the casting list, as an attempt to make sure it's right. This includes articles from before any official casting was announced though, meaning that currently, if you search up the FNAF movie cast, you're going to see it as if they have been cast, but this is all from articles, blog posts, and Reddit posts, and even more talking about what the community wants to see. So despite the fact that Willem Dafoe would make an incredible William Afton in my eyes, he hasn't actually been cast, I don't think, or at least least officially announced. It's a culmination of the most popular actors that the fans want, at least currently on Google, which I mean maybe Blumhouse should look at before February, and also cast me in it, please, because that would be fun as hell. I want to do that. Halfway through into number 5, Wally's Wonderland. While it's technically not a FNAF movie thing, this is the kind of thing that I had to include on this list. I mean, come on. This movie starring Nicolas Cage was most definitely meant to be a FNAF movie before the FNAF movie could come out. Quote, a quiet drifter is tricked into a janitorial job at the now condemned Willy's Wonderland. The mundane task suddenly becomes an all-out fight for survival against wave after wave of demonic animatronics. Fists fly, kicks land, titans clash, and only one side will make it out alive. This is basically just the plot to a FNAF fan game, but in a movie form, alright? I even thought that the movie was called Wally's World, which was either the location from a fan game, or it just goes to show how memorable this movie is in comparison to FNAF. So this would honestly be hilarious if like Wally's Wonderland characters or Willy's, whatever it's called, ends up actually like in a FNAF game or at some point, or like mentioned in the FNAF movie. I don't know, that'd be funny. Hell, maybe this is like the movie that Scott's in FNAF universe counterpart ended up making because of the games he made in universe, you know? Like how Scott gets a FNAF movie in our world, maybe his game version did too. I don't know, I think that'd be hilarious if that's the case. And considering how FNAF is kind of leaking into our world, I don't know, it wouldn't be that far of a stretch. And a cameo or reference to like a clear store brand FNAF movie within the actual FNAF movie would be absolutely insane, and I would love it. I would pay money just to see that reference. And at 4, theories. We also know that there are tons and tons of theories about the movie, enough to make up at least 2 lists on this channel. However, we can't really be sure of which ones are correct until the movie releases, but I guess that's kind of the point of theories. But let's go over some of the current ones, alright? There's a theory that Jack Black will at least make a cameo, considering the viral TikTok of the beloved actor singing the Living Tombstone song. I mean, like, the lyrics he sings are even Five Nights at Freddy's, that's where I wanna be. So to not let him be in Five Nights at Freddy's would just be a sin in my eyes, alright? Theories about the rating of the movie are also up in the air, positing that it could be something closer to rated R, considering how now most fans of the series are above the age of 18. Like, even looking at our statistics on previous FNAF videos, only 10% of the total viewers were between 13 and 17, and the other 90% was 18 and up. And the 10% could still be closer to 17 than 13, alright? However, if even Black Adam is going to end up dropping its rating, I'm pretty sure that for the sake of the brand, the FNAF movie is probably going to be PG-13 and maybe 14A at most, but most likely PG-13. And what I think is my personal favorite theory, the Scott Cawthon will reprise his role as the phone guy should the role be in the movie theory. I don't know, okay? We don't know much about the script that's being produced, but if it does have a phone guy, hopefully it will most likely be Scott, okay? And hopefully we'll get like a brief shot of him on the phone to get the fans cheering in the theater, because we'll all know that it's Scott. So, I don't know, that'd be fun. Getting close to the end, into number 3, Mike. Based on what we know, thanks to Scott's Reddit post from last year, we know that the Mike screenplay, as Scott called it, is the script that they're actually using for the movie. Or at least, the one that they were going to be using for the movie as of 2021. It's been over a year since that post, so things might have changed again, but based on what Scott was saying about it, it had all the right characters, all the right motivations, and all the right stakes. So we can assume that Mike will be in the movie, considering how it's the Mike screenplay, and if he isn't, that's kind of an additional misleading script title there, Scott. You're breaking Rule 9 even more. He also said in that post that filming would start in spring of 2022, and we all know how that went, so I don't know. If Mike is in the movie, we can also assume that the other Aftons will be present. Elizabeth and Crying Child could have potential to be in there, unless the movie takes place post 1983 bite. But Big Daddy Afton is bound to make an appearance, given that he's the main antagonist of the series and also the father of Mike. And I mean Big Daddy because he's the father of who is seemingly the main character, not in the other way. So please continue to refrain from sending me Springtrap themed content, please. If you do, I will block you and report. Penultimately, in at number 2, Emma Tammy. Jason Blum, while announcing that the movie would be filming in February of 2023, or allegedly at least, he also announced that Emma Tammy will be directing. Emma Tammy is seemingly a little-known director, at least to me. I don't think she has anything major on her resume. Most notably, I could see Into the Dark, Fair Chase, The Wind, and The Left-Right Game under her belt, so in my mind, this is certainly an interesting choice, but maybe someone that we don't know is who should be directing this movie, since with someone like Chris Columbus and like Warner Brothers, they would just be worried about setting up another movie and making a successful franchise, whereas Emma will be okay with having a one-off under her belt as long as it does well, and if it does do well, it will look good having a second one on there too, especially with such a popular franchise and such a famous studio behind her. So needless to say that while some of her work has been subject to criticism before, this is her chance to bring everything back into the positive, and personally I hope that she kills it. No pun intended. And finally, in at number 1, real animatronics. Now, originally, when I saw production photos of the team working on the design for the animatronics, I genuinely thought that this movie was going to be stop motion, like Tim Burton style basically, but after Jason Blumhouse announced that the Jim Henson Creature Shop is working on the animatronics, it all kind of clicked in my head, because that's just kind of how the Jim Henson Creature Shop makes their props and whatnot, that's the process. And if you don't know, these guys are incredible, and they've worked on some insane movies, which also makes them an incredibly cool addition. They've worked on Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, The Jungle Book, Where the Wild Things Are, Batman Begins, and The Muppets, not to mention Sesame Street, Jessie, and a whole lot more. And you know what, since Debbie Ryan is bae, I think that the Jessie thing is probably the biggest name drop on that list, alright? Ignore Hitchhikers, ignore Batman Begins, ignore Muppets, Jessie's where it's at. So yeah, this is gonna be pretty damn sick. So good job, guys.
Number 10, Jack Black. Because of Jack Black's love of FNAF with him playing it on Markiplier's channel with his son and making FNAF TikToks, people have theorized that he might be in the movie. Casting and updates on production have been slim to none, and while we know the film was slated to start filming this spring, we don't really know if it's started yet or what is going on or when it was actually set to start other than spring or who is in it. So many questions. Still, considering Jack Black's interests and the fact that he is a talented and all-around entertaining actor, I would not be surprised if he appeared in the film. The question is, who should he play? Phone guy? William Afton? One of the employees at Freddy Fazbear's? Or maybe he could be Scott Cawthon himself at some point in the movie. Scott Cawthon, after all, has inserted himself into the world as a game developer.
But Nights at Freddy's, that's where I wanna be for Nights at Freddy's.
Number 9, rating. The rating for the film is definitely something many of us have pondered on. Many people love FNAF, including younger kids. With that being a consideration, who the targeted demographic is for this film, and the varied ages in terms of its fan base, because I mean, it's not just kids, a lot of us love FNAF, it is possible that we'll see the rating of this film be lowered for this reason, in terms of what they'll be allowed to actually show. It makes the most sense that it'll be PG or PG-13 for this reason. If that is the case, the film will have to be careful in terms of what it shows or even implies, as a PG rating means that only some of the content is allowed to even be considered unsuitable for kids. Only some, and even considered. So many of the themes that we see in the games will have to be modified, cut, or made less scary somehow. The other theory with the rating is that we'll get one that more promotes and allows for the level of horror that we would expect. But in that case, the film would have to be a little bit more exclusive, with most children probably not being allowed to go see it. Either way, it seems we're going to have a problem when it comes to what is in the film in terms of horror components and who can actually go see it. And friends, before we move on to our next spot in the video, if you want to see this movie and you are concerned about the rating, or you're just like, let me see it, be sure to give us a thumbs up. It's true, when you give this video a thumbs up, it actually increases the speed at which the FNAF movie is produced. Number 8, part of the multiverse. It's really hard to contemplate the potential for this film to be canon. I mean, we have all the Fazbear Frights books, and I mean there's also more coming, and it really depends on who you talk to as to what level of canon they consider those books to be, if they include them in the game canon at all. I personally feel like while there are contradictions between the world of the books and the world of the games, it is possible that both of these could exist within the same world if we just acknowledge the existence of a FNAF multiverse. Then everything gets to be relevant, and some things can even overlap in terms of similar stories and explanations for characters. With the film, we could also see the introduction of a new universe belonging to the FNAF multiverse. That then not only gives us answers, but also helps us to connect the dots, as well as undoubtedly giving us more questions. Because, you know, this is still FNAF after all while being able to connect to the games and book canon, while still being able to have enough differences to keep us guessing and interested. Give me a FNAF multiverse, let's acknowledge it. Number 7, Stitch Wraith? Another theory that I have is that we will actually get to see some crossover between the books and the film, with the appearance of the villain known as Stitch Wraith. In fact, I'm even thinking we might not see Stitch Wraith in the games until after their appearance in the film. The Stitch Wraith, being a seemingly methodical villain, could make for a good ally for a mastermind who is working behind the scenes and pulling all the strings. Stitch Wraith might not have as big of a role in the film, but appear in a post-credits scene and help to set up a FNAF franchise, being an important villain shrouded in mystery whose true purpose and master is revealed later on down the line. Kinda like we see in the books. Number 6, Springtrap. One of the scariest animatronics around is definitely Springtrap, which is the hybrid suit that William Afton wore and later found himself trapped in when he was spring-locked and impaled while wearing it. Springtrap is the main antagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's 3. In FNAF 3 we face hallucinations which can terrorize us, as well as the very real threat of Springtrap, which comes with William Afton's body inside it, controlling the suit. Just the idea of a human being who became impaled by a bunch of springs and mechanics and trapped within a suit, each step creating agonizing pain as those locks and springs grind against your bones, is horrific. Also, just the visual image of an animatronic that seems to be oozing something bodily, some blood or pus with real eyes, it creates a powerful and haunting visual that would make for a compelling villain throughout the film. I'm just saying. Number 5, FNAF 1. The film will take inspiration from the first game, at least that's what we've been led to believe. This theory has been based around things Scott Cawthon said on Reddit and suggested the main protagonist of the film will be the security guard that we play as in the first game, and will expand on his story. The security guard is named Mike Schmidt, and many believe that this is an alias that is actually used by Michael Afton, William's son, who accepted the job for a yet unconfirmed purpose, but one that is highly speculated to be heroic or investigatory in nature. As such, the film is believed to have centered around Michael Afton, who will of course become the protagonist and possibly hero of this story. Number 4, Scott Cawthon plays Phone Guy. Obviously, we are all going to lose our minds if we don't get a Scott cameo or Easter egg somewhere in this film, but if we are going the way of FNAF 1, I think it would only be fitting if Scott reprised his role of Phone Guy, personally. He could of course just provide the voice for the character, who we may also never see in the film, just like in the game, but I think we are all hoping and expecting to see his face show up somewhere on screen, even if it's only briefly. I personally know I would love to at least get a single scene with Scott as Phone Guy where we see what ended up happening to him, or simply get a tease as to his gruesome fate on screen. There are a lot of ways that Scott as Phone Guy could make an appearance that would be satisfying and entertaining. Number 3, the franchise. If the FNAF movie focuses on FNAF 1, most people also expect, like with the games and books, we could see more films planned out, depending on the success of this one of course. Ideally, this FNAF movie could be a jumping off point for a whole series of films and a film franchise based around the games and even books at some point as well. It is possible that with this film, Scott and the studio could already be setting stuff up that will come into play later down the line, not just considering this film as a standalone story, but as a piece to a much larger, more intricate puzzle, like we've seen with other successful video game inspired film franchises and comics inspired film franchises besides. Number 2, Bite of 87. Another idea for the film is that it will be the precursor to FNAF 1 and simply focus on it in terms of setting it up. We could see the beginnings of the restaurant be its focus, or at least see an element of that included, perhaps focusing on the mystery of the Bite of 87. And maybe we'll also get like a younger Mike in this movie, and also answering the mysteries behind the Bite of 87. This could be the film that sets up the world and with it establishes a more clear narrative in terms of the accidents that took place and who is at fault. It is also weird that I would actually be really into a sort of murder mystery vibe for a film that dives into the Bite of 87. Is that weird? Was it Mangle? I mean, I need to know. I have so many questions. Things are still unclear. Just give me a movie that explains the timeline. That would be magic to me. Number 1, William Afton's origins. One of the things that I feel like would be the most earth-shattering if it were to appear would be the origin story for William Afton. It would be amazing if we got a film centered on him and his life, which helped us to understand just why he became a murderer and what his motives are. Was Afton a well-intentioned business owner and family man and something happened to him? Or did he always have more sinister intentions when it came to the Fazbear franchise? Is his story real? Or does it perhaps only exist in video games made by the company who created Help Wanted and who are interested in simply sensationalizing an accident that happened at a real restaurant? It would be crazy if it turned out to be that meta of reasoning as to like why he exists, but in a weird way it could also make a lot of sense and solve a lot of like weird plot holes that we have. Either way, if we get some hints even to this huge question mark that is William Afton and why he kills, that would be amazing. Of course, with Scott, it tends to be a ratio of 1 to 10 for questions answered to questions created, so we'll have to wait and see if we get any answers or stories explaining this, and if we do, how many more questions they then create. Number 10, a twist. Obviously, we are already well versed in the story of FNAF. Well, I mean, well-versed isn't exactly accurate, as there are still admittedly a lot of pieces missing when it comes to the lore, but you know what I mean. There is a lot that we already know, like who the main villain is, how the victims were killed, etc, etc. Many of the mysteries have been solved, and then many still remain unsolved. So how will the film adaptation keep us on our toes? Well, some believe this will happen with debunked theories being utilized, giving us a sort of unexpected alternate storyline that can still surprise us. Such as, what if the phone guy was actually the purple guy? Or what if the experience of the games is all the recurring nightmare of the murderer who killed everyone and represents their guilt over what they've done? Number 9, post-credits scene. I feel like this one is a given considering that we have so many successful franchises out there already, and so many other studios interested right now in turning their film idea into the next successful one. But what will the post-credits scene be about is the question. To warrant an educated guess, we would need to know a lot more about the plot probably, but for now we can try to guess based off of what we know about the story thus far. So, we know the screenplay Scott Cawthon and the team decided to go with is referred to as the Mike screenplay, and that it has the best pieces from all the other previous attempts. Many people believe that the screenplay will be based off of the events of the first game based on the name for it, so what does that mean? Namely that the post-credits scene will likely hint at the fact that the secrets that were revealed during the film are likely even bigger than we could imagine. We could see the hint at a greater villain such as William Afton or Stitch Wraith, or perhaps even Circus Baby and Sister Location. After all, the films don't need to follow the same path or order as the games, they just have to keep us intrigued and entertained. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder to hit that like button if you haven't already, and if you want more FNAF content here on this channel. Remember, every time you hit that like, it takes a day off of when we can expect to see this film. It's shortening the time. Just kidding, it's not shortening the time, but who knows, maybe it is, it could be possible. Number 8, Willy's Wonderland Easter egg. Everyone knows about the other film that recently came out that is basically Five Nights at Freddy's, but without the official IP or license. It stars Nick Cage as a passerby who gets roped into working the night shift at Willy's Wonderland, in exchange for having his broken down car repaired. His character spends most of the film not speaking, but proves himself to be more of a threat to the animatronics that roam the family restaurant than they are to him. Willy's Wonderland was not made in partnership with anything FNAF, but it was still evidently inspired by the franchise. It would be cool to see some kind of nod to Willy's in the film, even if it's just perhaps like a light joke poking fun at the copycat film or the franchise featured in it. Because although like they kind of are taking the idea, I kind of love when people are like inspired by things like FNAF and make cool stuff out of it. Number 7, Nick Cage cameo. Nick Cage being the star character of Willy's Wonderland would make a pretty cool person to cameo in FNAF. 1, so many people are big fans of Cage, and 2, he just starred in a film that definitely had major FNAF vibes, while not being officially tied to the franchise or its own film in any way. Thus far, anyways. Also, Nick Cage is just fun, and he's usually up for a laugh with a good sense of humor, even when it comes to himself and his own body of work, so this could be something he'd be up for. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't mind a little crossover between the two very different films, which share a very similar premise. Number 6, You've Got a Friend in Me. Well, we know that one of the screenplays Scott Cawthon got rid of, referred to as the Pawn Shop screenplay in his FNAF Movie Reddit post, featured too much of a friendship connection between a boy and an animatronic. It could be possible that we'll still see some element of this reflected in the film. After all, the main villain, as we know from the games, is actually William Afton, and the animatronics, while murderous, are just as much his victims, souls of children trapped within them, fueling the vengeful actions of the animatronics, but really deep down wanting to be free. It would be cool to see some kind of team-up moment between our protagonist and at least one animatronic, where for a moment their goals line up and they are inclined even to maybe help one another. Number 5, Chuck E. Cheese sponsor. This seems highly unlikely given the fragile state that Chuck E. Cheese is in right now, having kind of just emerged from bankruptcy, but it could also be really smart of the Chuck E. Cheese franchise to team up with FNAF. After all, think of how much money they could make if they tried to appeal more to the FNAF fan, who keep saying at least how much they wish Freddy's was real and that they wish they could visit a version of the restaurant in real life. Ideally, a more safe version, I imagine, but I think the potential in terms of money that could be made all around from that partnership could be huge. It would be cool to see Chuck E. Cheese acknowledged or promoted somewhere in the film, considering it's as close as we have to a real-life Freddy's currently. Number 4, Freddy's Pop-Up. Closer to the release of the film, another idea for something we could see in terms of promotion, perhaps once again in partnership with Chuck E. Cheese, is a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Pop-Up. Even if it wasn't a place you could go to play games and be entertained by animatronics, having even a pop-up delivery pizza place with costumed versions of the animatronics, maybe even delivering pizza, would be insane. Great for promotion, great for hype, and also great for revenue. Maybe even great for pizza? It would also blow my mind if this happened as a promotional stunt and the pizza itself was amazing. That would be unlikely, but I would also embrace it and it would be awesome. Number 3, puppet appearance. One of the characters in animatronics that I think is the most terrifying is the puppet, which makes me wonder if we could potentially see the character in the film. Will we get to know Charlie's story or merely see this animatronic as some kind of monster? Will we even get to learn the truth of the trapped souls within the animatronics in this adaptation at all? Or will that reveal be left for a sequel as a kind of misdirect, because we'll be like, where was that? And then later they'll be like, oh, it's still there. I would love to see Charlie and Henry make an appearance of some kind, and for us to get some kind of insight into their story and involvement with the Freddy's franchise. If anything, as horrifying as the puppet is, I think because of Charlie's involvement and backstory, this could make the animatronic a really, really good option for what I was talking about earlier, with maybe one or all of the animatronics being somewhat helpful to our protagonist at some point in the film. Or perhaps Henry himself will make an appearance helping out in memory of his lost daughter, which could also be cool. Number 2, new narrative. While we've all speculated on which games will really inspire the film's story and which bits of narrative from the games will make it into the film, it's entirely possible, like with other successful franchises, that the FNAF movie will take inspiration from the games and the plots there, but provide their own take on where the story goes and what secrets are revealed. After all, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is now a long and developed and highly profitable film franchise, has relied on giving people fresh takes on established characters and their stories, to keep those interested in the source material, the comics, the animated series, and previous animated films more on their toes. I think this is something that will be integral actually to the film's success. We want to feel that tie to the games, but we also want the movie to surprise us, because I mean, that's a big part of what we love in general about the games and their lore and this franchise. The twists, the turns, the speculation, the unexpected reveals. Number 1, release date? When will we see this film? Most sources seem to claim that the FNAF movie is filming currently, with the film having been expected to start filming in spring of 2021, which I mean, is kinda now. However, if it was filming currently, it would be likely we'd see some kind of buzz about the shoot, and yet we don't really have any confirmed images from the set. There are, however, lots of fan film set images available if that interests you, and in fact some of those fan film sets are pretty impressive, so something to look at least while you wait for official images from the movie itself. The lack of set news and pictures, however, means that it's more than likely the film is still in pre-production stages, with our last report coming from Jason Blum late last year, stating that they were still ironing out the details of the plot and Scott himself only making the post confirming the script premise 4 months ago. What does this mean for release? Well, we don't really have an announced cast yet, and once we have that, it'll likely be 2 years from then till we can kind of expect the movie to hit theaters, which means that if the cast was announced, let's say this year in 2021, we likely wouldn't be able to expect the film until 2023. So sadly, the release date could be a while.
Number 10, new animatronic. This is something that would probably break the internet if it happened. A new animatronic being introduced in the film would be huge. While this theory isn't really based on any facts, it's a theory that I kind of still hope happens. I'm sure the FNAF movie will have tons of surprises in store for us to keep us guessing, keep us on our toes, and this is one that I personally would just love to see happen. There are so many animatronics that have been introduced via the games over the years. It would be cool to see a new animatronic find its way into the franchise via the film. The question is, what kind of animatronic would you want to see? And who do you think would be a cool animal, or perhaps a non-animal animatronic, to join Freddy's horrific crew? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. I promise you, if you click like, it means that all of your dreams will come true in this movie. Anything that you want, just think about it. Click like. Oh, it's gonna happen now. It's definitely gonna happen. Disclaimer, it might not happen. Sorry about that. Number 9, book tie-ins. In his Reddit post listing previous screenplay attempts and the final chosen pitch, Scott Cawthon mentioned that he tried 3 times to write a screenplay based on the books with co-writer Kira Breed Risley, but that his inexperience in screenplay writing ultimately got in the way of any of these sticking or being good in his opinion, even with Kira's help. However, it is possible that we could see elements of the books pop up in the film, either tied into the plot or alluded to in Easter eggs. I would still say it's a good idea to brush up on these books before watching the film, as I feel like focusing on the plot of the first game will give Scott more freedom to elaborate on elements of the books without being tied to them as much, which was likely the problem when he approached screenwriting solely from that angle. Number 8, Golden Freddy's appearance. Golden Freddy is a rare character that pops up in the first game, so it is very likely we could see him pop up in the movie as well. But perhaps we'll get to see a different version of the character, a more synchronized one in comparison to the other animatronics. Perhaps we'll get to see an active animatronic version of Golden Freddy on the prowl in the film, and have him join his fellow teammates in terrifying our protagonist or protagonists. It could be cool to see Golden Freddy play a more active role in the film, seeing as how he's kind of more of a rare side character in the game. Or perhaps instead we'll get something more in line with that and only get a little peek or Easter egg in regards to his appearance in the FNAF movie. Of course, I'd prefer if he had a more active role, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Number 7, the real monster. The animatronics in the first game are the main antagonists you go up against, but as the story has developed throughout the game franchise, we have learned that although the animatronics pose great risk and have murderous tendencies, they aren't the main villain. William Afton is. I'm more inclined to believe that, like the game, some other greater villain will be revealed to be the mastermind behind it all, and that the animatronics in the end, like in the games, will also sort of be victims of that main villain. Perhaps it will be William Afton. The animatronics will just have vengeful spirits trapped within them who are kind of warped into something evil, and in fact in the end they may even help our hero by the end of the movie, banding together with them to fight against this greater evil. That would be really satisfying to watch, I think. Number 6, Markiplier. This is a fan theory that I personally think could actually end up happening. While Markiplier is a YouTube personality well known for his game playthroughs, he is also a performer and an actor and has played characters in various music videos, and he even had his own YouTube original interactive adventure series, A Heist with Markiplier. He definitely is comfortable being on camera, and he has the personality for entertainment for sure. And he's a huge FNAF fan and supporter, so it would make a lot of sense if he got even just a small role in the film. Of course, Mark did tweet about his thoughts on landing a role in the FNAF movie in 2015, and he didn't seem too optimistic, tweeting, "To the people telling me I need to be in the FNAF movie, I don't think that's how movies are done." But hey, that was 2015 and it was a long time ago, and a lot has changed since then. Many fans are speculating that Mark will have a role in the film, but will likely have to wait to find out just what. Number 5. Time period. One thing that we always need to come back to with FNAF is the timeline, which honestly is just, it's kind of everywhere. What is this timeline? When it comes to the film though, it makes us wonder what year the film will actually be set in. Scott on Reddit mentioned that it would center around the story told in the first game and as the security guard we play as in that game named Mike. Does that mean it will be set then in the same time period or adapted to modern day? I feel like having a cell phone in your pocket that you could just, call for help on or use as a flashlight could make things feel a lot less scary. So it seems likely that the story will be told in a similar time period to the games, either the 80s or the 90s. Both of these time periods are also pretty trendy right now when it comes to eras that we enjoy revisiting in film, television, and other entertainment. What do you think? Will we see a more modern take on this story, or will it be set in the same time period as the games? Also, how will the movies even attempt to approach this tangled timeline? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 4. Visiting Pirate Cove. Everyone loves Foxy, so it's of course very likely that we'll see him appear in the film. But I believe we'll get not just a closer look at the restaurant's interior and get to explore it in a beautiful cinematic setting, but we will actually get to take a look behind the curtain and get immersed in what Pirate Cove is like. Foxy being such a fan favorite, I think will translate to some more screen time for the animatronic, as well as further exploration and development on not just him as a character, but also his personality and his home of Pirate Cove. I know that Foxy likely won't be the friend that we'd all hoped he was, sadly, but it would still be cool to see him more prominently featured in the film and to get to explore what might lurk behind that curtain. I really want there to be like a Freddy's so I can actually go to Pirate Cove, because I love pirates. I even have a pirate tattoo, so I'm so ready for this. Number 3. Lots of jump scares. FNAF heavily uses jump scares to startle its players, with animatronics each having their own jump scare animation, used to startle you once that animatronic has caught you, or depending on which game in the franchise you are playing, just to unnerve you if they happen to only be a hallucination. Jump scaring is also a technique typically employed in the making of horror films, where tension is built up for something to leap out at you, or when an otherwise calm or focused moment is interrupted suddenly by a ghoul or monster that unexpectedly startles you. Music is also a huge part of this technique, and having the right music come in at the right time can really heighten the fear you feel. Honestly, most horror films rely heavily on their score, their music to startle you. Trust me. Try watching your favorite horror film on mute and see what a difference it makes. It'll probably make a really big one. Because jump scares are so heavily utilized in the games, it's likely we'll also see this horror tactic used heavily in the film in some capacity. I personally anticipate a lot of jump scare fakeouts just to keep us on our toes. Like a lot of moments where you're like, oh, is there gonna be one? And then there isn't one, and then they get you somewhere else. Ugh, I love/hate that in movies. Number 2. A very special cameo. On part 1 of my list, I talked about the theory that we could see Scott Cawthon reprise his role from the video game of Phone Guy, but while that would be super cool, admittedly just seeing him anywhere in the film would be satisfying. Any cameo would be great, and I will take it. Perhaps he could be himself in the film, a game designer, approaching someone in management at Freddy's about getting licensing rights so that he could make a game. He could be a guest at the restaurant. There could be an Easter egg featuring him hidden somewhere in the film. All of these would be satisfying for me. It feels pretty guaranteed though that we'll see Scott appear somewhere in the film. After all, fans would likely revolt if they didn't. And Scott Cawthon definitely loves to get in on the ground floor when it comes to the franchise and his involvement in basically just all of the parts in it. So having him appear in the film seems very on the nose for his kind of approach to basically all of this stuff. Number 1. Questions answered. We may or may not see William Afton appear in the film, but regardless of if we see him or not, I am still hoping we'll get some questions answered when it comes to, well, the purpose of all of this. On part 1, we talked a bit about potential antagonists we could see here and potential motivations that could be revealed. But either way, I'm betting that this film will give us some answers to some pretty big questions. And like most other parts of the franchise, also give us just some pretty big questions to be puzzled out by fans later on. Because it honestly wouldn't be FNAF without a bit of unresolved intrigue now, would it? Mainly, I think this film will focus on why previous murders or other such terrors specified took place, and will solve that mystery. Perhaps just in a way that fits the plot of the film, or perhaps giving us some more universal motivation in terms of the games, books, and the overall FNAF verse.